joining us for the James E. Proctor Jr. Forum on Education, Leadership, and Innovation. And before I get started, I want to point you to the scan, the Q code. Young people do this really well, but we're getting in the hang of it. You can get your program this way, or we have a few old-fashioned programs at the back. But this way, you can follow along if you would like to. And so, as I'm starting to say welcome, I want to say, first acknowledge our president, President Amita Bro, and our provost, Provost Carl Goodman, and Delegate Susie Proctor, and Stephanie Proctor Williams and her family, and lots of our special guests like our superintendents who have come to speak with us today. Dr. Darrell Williams is on his way, Dr. Monifa McKnight, and Dr. Monica Golson, superintendents in Maryland. We are so happy to have them. There are alumni in the audience. We're delighted that you've joined us. And I want to put a special shout out to Dr. Long, who is the person who is the department chair for Teaching, Learning, and Professional Development, and Director of Teacher Education, who has brought her students here to be with us this evening. And to all the faculty and staff of the College of Education, a special shout out to you. And as I go down the list, I don't want to forget our students. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. We think you'll be inspired this evening by our speakers. And so I want to talk just about the occasion for a minute. I want to talk about James E. Proctor Jr. You know, he had a strong head and a strong heart. You know why I know that? It's because he went to Bowie State University for his bachelor's and his master's degree. I know he had a strong head. It was quite a man. He dedicated his life to educational opportunities in Maryland. He got his BA and BS here at Bowie. He worked as an educator in Prince George's County Public Schools. And you know, I know he had a strong heart. Why do I know that? Because he got $200 million. He supported it for education and here at Bowie State University. So I know he had a strong heart. The building was recently named about 6 years ago after James E. Proctor Jr. And we appreciate that we get a chance to celebrate and extend his legacy, the pipeline that he envisioned, people coming here, getting their education, and going out to be educators. And I know that whether you're here at this level, or you're at the master's level, or at the doctoral level, you are going to be living legacy, a living legacy to James E. Proctor. So thank you so much for coming out this evening. And it is my job and my honor to introduce Dr. Amita Bro, who will be the first president, she's the 10th president of Bowie State University and the first female president of Bowie State University. We are glad that she is here to give us greetings this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jetter, and welcome to Bowie State University. How are we doing out here? All right, that's what I want to hear. BSU, it's so wonderful to see so many of you in person this year. Yes, last year we were fully virtual, but we are moving ahead, and as we say around here, we are racing to excellence. We've made great progress, and it's great to see so many of you in person as well as virtually. Welcome to you all, whether you're here or you're watching through the live streaming. It is truly my honor to welcome you to this lecture this evening. Yes, I am the very proud 10th president of Bowie State University, and it is my distinct honor to once again welcome everyone to the annual James Proctor Lecture. Each year, we honor the legacy of the late Delegate Proctor by hosting this lecture to focus on the topic that was paramount in his life, the support of higher education. And I'd especially like to welcome the Proctor family, Stephanie Williams Proctor, Delegate Susie Proctor, James Proctor III, and the entire Proctor family and friends who are here with us this evening. Please give them a round of applause. And a special welcome to our very special guests who are with us this evening. I know we're waiting on one other speaker to arrive, but I'd like to welcome the interim superintendent of the Montgomery County Public Schools, Dr. Monifa McKnight. Please give her a round of applause. And once again, the CEO of the Prince George's County Public Schools, Dr. Monica Golson, please. And many thanks to Dean Rhonda Jeter. Thank you so very much, our Dean of the College of Education, for all that you have done for our students here, leading the way in the College of Education. We are so indebted to you and Triopia, Washington, for all you have contributed to tonight's event, but for what you and the members of the faculty do throughout the year. I would like for members of the College of Education, would you please stand so we may recognize you at this time? Please give them a round of applause. Come on, you can do better than that. All right, that's what I want to hear. Thank you so much, thank you. And a special shout out to all who are behind the scenes. You know, it's no easy feat to pull these events together today. We used to just show up in a room and that was it. You'd hand out a program, as you mentioned earlier. But today we live in hybrid, high flex, and different modalities. And so I want to recognize our conference and event services staff and the institutional advancement staff for what they do behind the scenes. They're unsung heroes. Please give them a round of applause. We have adjusted and pivoted in new ways to move forward in including hybrid programs and new models for meeting the change in this environment. And we thank all of those who have helped to bring us together. We are here in the James E. Proctor building, which is another testament to the man and to his legacy of valuing education and ensuring our youth are able to realize their hopes and dreams of a college degree. Welcome, good to see you, Dr. Williams. Please join me in a round of applause for Dr. Williams, our superintendent of the Baltimore County Public Schools. Welcome. We know too well that the work must continue on that Delegate James Proctor started, and indeed it does continue on. It continues on at a state level with our esteemed alumna, Delegate Susie Proctor, who has always, always held up the mantle for supporting higher education. We thank you so very much. She knows firsthand as a delegate, but before becoming a delegate, she was a teacher. And she knows firsthand what it takes to ensure our students have the experiences and the developmental experiences throughout their journey in their academic careers. Again, thank you, Delegate Proctors, for your support of higher education and for your alma mater. We welcome you back once again. Welcome back. And again, thank you to Stephanie Williams Proctor, an education advocate, among many other notable distinctions, for your commitment to carry forth the legacy of your father through your leadership and support of the Proctor Lecture. This lecture has become a much anticipated annual event that brings together outstanding leaders in the field of education. And it is because of your dedication throughout the year to this lecture and the larger educational community that we are able to share new practices, new knowledge to the benefit of the field of education. And the students who are here in this room and virtually, they have so much that they are seeking to do, and they have hopes and dreams and aspirations. And so we thank you all for the best practices, the new models, and your experiences that you will share here this evening. Again, to our guest speakers this evening, it's always an honor to be in your presence. We are so appreciative of you being a part of the annual Proctor Lecture and for your leadership throughout the year. These are truly unusual times as the country and the world continues to combat the crises caused by the pandemic and the crisis of social injustice in our society and the intersectionality of the two. And so your presence here tonight is especially welcome as we try to chart a course forward to ensure our students are prepared with the knowledge they need, but also prepared within a historic context and a cultural understanding to live, work, and thrive in this new normal. Thank you all for being here this evening and for what you have done in support of our youth. This has been an extraordinary time, and I believe that you all deserve a round of praise and applause for being here tonight, but for what you do each and every day to lead in your roles. Please give them a round of applause now. And finally, I'm looking forward to your remarks this evening. Again, welcome to Bowie State University, the first HBCU in the state of Maryland. Welcome, my Bulldogs, and don't forget the championship game. The NCAA playoffs is at 1 o'clock on Saturday at Bulldog Stadium, and I see folks applauding back there. Yes, go Bulldogs. Welcome to BSU, and welcome to the Proctor Lecture. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to President Breaux, definitely to Dr. Rhonda Jeter, our Dean for the College of Education, to our panel guests, to our superintendents, Dr. Golson, Dr. McKnight, and Dr. Williams. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all that you do for our education system here in the state of Maryland. Good evening to our faculty and to our students, as well as to our staff here in the College of Education. It is more fitting for today as we celebrate American Education Week. We gather here to discuss the future of education in the post-pandemic. First and foremost, I'd like to say that Bowie State continues to honor our late James E. Proctor Jr. for his years of service to the Maryland legislators, but also to the states of HBCUs here in Maryland. Thank you to to Ms. Susie Proctor, and for your family for joining us here today. The entire Bowie family welcomes you and remains eternally grateful for your husband's efforts to what he's done here at Bowie State University. The pandemic continues to create a new normal for public schools and universities alike. Safety protocols dominate every agenda and planning discussions. In each educational setting, administrators have had to discuss teachers and faculty well-being to a major scale. Students have had a variety of experiences due to the pandemic, requiring our assistance in both finding and maintaining stability. Consequently, our discussions on mental health have increased considerably. Flexibility has proven to be the key resource along the patients in terms of how we deal with today's society. When we look at the CDC, as well as our Prince George's County Public Health Department, making our public schools a safe place and making sure that our students, our teachers, and our staff remains safe is a paramount and concern. Finding ways to strengthen student engagements and enhancements of our student retention hinges upon how students remain connected to our schools. Certainly, this panel tonight, we will discuss how we can connect with our students. One of the greatest challenges that faces in our school districts today, particularly here in Maryland and around the country, continues to be on internet access and the strength of Wi-Fi connectivity. The pandemic raises our awareness to disparities that exist in access to broadband. Fortunately, the infrastructure bill that we see today will try to address many of our concerns. Again, I welcome all of our participants, and I am certain that today's lecture will prove to be not only thought-provoking, but also provide solutions in terms of what we're dealing with today. Thank you very much.
And now to introduce our panelists, Mrs. Stephanie Proctor Williams.
Good evening. Dr. Breaux, Dean Jeter, my mother, my brother, and I could not be more thrilled to be here for the 5th annual James E. Proctor Jr. Forum for Education, Leadership, and Innovation. So my task tonight is to introduce this illustrious panel, Dr. Monica Goldson, Dr. Manifa McKnight, and Dr. Darrell Williams. However, I think that before we meet these three illustrious leaders who are in the midst of their own remarkable career journeys, who have a long list of amazing accomplishments, I'd like to think about why these incredibly busy people are here with us tonight. So I had the pleasure of inviting each of them. I sent some text messages, and I got yes, yes, And yes, before I could even finish typing on the keypads. You have to wonder, these are really busy people. Why did they respond yes so quickly? I'll tell you why. Can we start by asking all of the students in the room tonight at any degree-seeking level to please stand? All of the BSU students.
Yeah.
You are why these leaders are here. They support you. They are proud of you. They believe in you. They want to hire you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I also think it's fair to say that they'd like to see some of you sitting up here in their
Yes.
seats one day.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with me, Superintendent?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I'd like the superintendents to just join me in thanking and congratulating each of you for starting your career journey in the field of education. Now, for the second reason each of them so quickly responded yes, I will refer you to the summaries. And I do mean summaries because they have quite long lists of accomplishments. These summaries of their bios are accessed in the program that Dr. Jetter mentioned. But I want to share a little bit from their bios that I think you will see how they each have a special connection with each of you here tonight. Dr. Monica Goldson has a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Florida A&M University, a master's degree in elementary and secondary school administration from Bowie State University, and a doctorate in educational administration and policy from Howard University. Dr. McKnight has a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education from South Carolina University, a Master of Science in Educational Leadership from Bowie State University. She also has a Doctorate of Education in Educational Leadership and Policy from the University of Maryland. Dr. Williams earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Mathematics from Hampton University, his Master of Arts degree in Educational Administration from American University, and completed his doctoral degree from the University of Maryland College Park, and he is a proud Bowie Bulldog dad.
There you go. Give him in there.
Thank each of you for being here tonight and joining me in welcoming our guests. At this time, we are going to ask that each of the superintendents share their opening comments, and then Mr. Cooley will lead us in a brief Q&A. Dr. Goldson, would you mind starting us off?
All right, thank you. Thank you for that amazing introduction, and I am honored to be here at Bowie State tonight. So we were asked to talk about what post-COVID in education looks like. And so I'm here to tell you we're not out of COVID yet, sorry. We're still experiencing it. But I can tell you in July of 2020, when I had to make a decision around what the opening of school would look like in the fall, that our lives would forever be changed in public education. I even went so far as to create a video to make sure our teachers understood it and our administrators and our parents knew that. So what we had known for hundreds of years around education, how we learned, how we were taught, what we read about, what we looked at in movies will forever be changed because of that. And that was the time that we also made a decision, myself and the executive leadership team, that this was also, we had a motto during COVID, the pandemic, that was never let a good crisis go to waste. And we did some serious soul searching and talking amongst ourselves and talked about what it was that we needed to do to transform PGCPS. And that required us to then begin to hire an outside firm to really look at our strategic plan while we were in the midst of the pandemic. We had the nerve to decide that we were going to have a serious look at who we are as an organization. And I posed 5 questions that we started out with our team, so much so that it caused people to say, okay, let me go home, think about it, and come back. And the fact that they had to go do that, and I'm going to share those 5 questions with you, meant that we had to do it throughout our organization. And so I hired a firm, Hanover Research, to come in and actually work with parents, staff, educators, community members to answer those 5 questions. And it's what we've now created a strategic plan called Transformation 2026. Because we know that we have to change what our students experience and our staff and our families from the time that they walked in our door in September for the rest of their lives. Those 5 questions were, why does Prince George's County Public Schools exist? Is our mission and vision relevant to the needs of the environment? How does the culture of the organizational environment in which we operate enable the mission to be carried out? What does our diverse community of stakeholders expect from the district? How does the organization envision its future? And what specific goals and strategies will guide objectives and action planning necessary for the district to achieve its desired goals? After posing those questions, we all had to sit back and think about what we were a part of, what we had promoted. I'm a graduate of PGCPS, so I've known it far longer than most people. I've seen it as a student, I've seen it as a teacher, because I've been here for 30 years now. I've seen it as a parent, but now I had to look at it through a totally different lens. And with thousands of people in input, we were able to come up with now 5 strategic imperatives. And it really helps to drive our organizational conversation and begin to change how we look and think about public education. The first one was around academic innovation. And the fact that we said innovation meant that we couldn't do the same thing that we've always done. And for the first time, we created a secondary virtual learning campus for grades 7 through 12 for this fall. But we were very strategic. We wanted to make sure that we put a cap on the number of students that could go in, because I didn't want parents to just opt to go into a virtual learning academy just so that they could not get the vaccination. Yeah, so we had to limit the number of seats we had. And we had to put a GPA cap. So I had to say that if you had a 2.5 or higher, then you could apply, and you had to have a certain number of absences. Couldn't have a lot of absences. We offered an all virtual evening school program for every high school. So we no longer had to worry about students trying to get to 3 locations in the district that were close to a transportation line, and we added in a tutoring feature at every last one of those sites. Because we knew the kids could get to their base school. They couldn't get to those 3 sites. We were only putting them in those 3 sites because they were close to a bus line. We hadn't thought about our community like we should have. So we were able to now roll out an evening program that was totally different. And we decided to re-examine and refine academic policies and opportunities where we created obstacles for students to get into our programs. Because when you do some serious soul searching, you understand that you also have policies and practices that hinder the ability for everyone to have equal access. And so we're starting that process, have already started changing administrative procedures and practices that have been years in the making to undo some things that we've already done to ourselves and to our own community. The second area was around transformative workforce. And that meant that we had to reimagine what leadership development looked like. So we have our own now training program for transportation, because I want our bus drivers to be supervisors. I don't need to look outside. I can look from within. And we now have a program that supports employees getting their bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree. And why even just bachelor's? You're wondering what? Because we have food service workers and custodians who don't have their bachelor's degree. And they want to move up, but they don't have the coursework. And so we decided we would provide a program that allowed them to be able to do that and work, and we could help to subsidize it. And then we've done some non-traditional ways of recruitment. We've done Zoom, thank goodness, now helps us to be able to go all across the U.S. and not have to travel, and nor do the candidates have to go anywhere. We received an award this summer for having drive-through application process. Now, who would have thought that you could get in your car and go and actually never get out of it and get a job if you weren't going to the McDonald's or 7-Eleven or Wendy's? And we also are very cognizant of what our student body looks like and making sure that we find staff that looks like our student body. So having been a student in PGCPS, I can tell you many of my educators didn't look like me. And you can't be what you don't see. And so we're very deliberate about trying to make sure that the people that we put in front of our children are people that our students can relate to. And I'm honored that today I had the opportunity to go and congratulate one of our teachers who looks just like the students in front of her, who has been named the Global Teacher of the Year and has received $1 million award. So congratulations. Yes. Amazing, amazing. She's only been a teacher in education for 16 years. The third area was organizational learning culture, and that was really an opportunity for us to become a learning environment. Even though we're in public education, we still constantly have to learn. And it's what started us having, we've done our 2 summer book studies. I decided to do a book study summer before last on implicit bias with 1,000 of my closest friends. And those were people in PGCPS. We purchased the book, they volunteered in the summer, and we did 200 breakout groups of 5. And they were led by other educators, and we literally read the book and talked about the baggage that we brought to the table and how it showed up in our work and what we had to do differently. This past summer, I had the opportunity to have 1,500 of my closest friends join me for a second book study called This Book is Anti-Racist. The opportunity to talk about what white privilege looks like, how it shows up, how we interact with people of other cultures, what it looks like in our curriculum, how we change our curriculum, and how we honor the voice of our students. And I am proud to say that we just did a systemic professional development led by students to our staff about LGBTQ+, what that means for them, how it shows up, how they're treated, and how it makes them feel. The fourth area, and there are only 5, I'll move quickly. The fourth one is safe and supportive environment. And most of the time when we say that, people think around actual physical safety. But when we really talk to thousands of our stakeholders and staff and students, this time we had to focus on mental health. So right now we have mental health practitioners in 91 of our schools. Our goal by the end of this school year is 144. I have 208 buildings. So I have to get mental practitioners in every last one of those buildings by the end of next school year. But not just for schools, I need it for my staff. You know, I say to people all the time, I think we have forgotten that we were out for 18 months. But we were out, and our students saw some of the worst situations that they could ever imagine. They saw their parents lose their jobs, not have money to eat. We said school continued. We gave them laptops, but then we had to realize that people needed Wi-Fi access, socialization skills, some homes where they didn't speak English, and we had to figure out how to teach them English remotely. And then they lost family members from COVID, and they couldn't even go to a funeral home to bring closure. And then school reopened, and we wanted them all to come back and act like nothing happened. Impossible. Impossible. And so that is why mental health supports is so important and key. And in a community of color, many times there was a stigma around going to see a mental health practitioner. So honestly, having the ability to become a one-to-one district and having technology means that they can meet with someone from the comforts of their home with no one even knowing it. And we have seen the number of students and staff who have accessed mental practitioners quadruple just because of privacy and confidentiality. And then lastly, around infrastructure and operational enhancements. And that is, for our buildings, they average about 50 years in age. Now, many of us know we don't live in homes that have been 50 years old without making some major renovations. We had not made major renovations in many of our buildings. So I'm grateful that I sit before you and say that 9 buildings are being built as we speak and will open in fall 2023. We've never, ever had 9 schools built at one time. So I'm extremely proud of the work that we're doing there. But also, when we became a one-to-one school district, we realized that our infrastructure for Wi-Fi was just subpar. It was not the best. So we had to put hotspots on every last one of our buildings so people could come up to our buildings and access Wi-Fi. I paid for Comcast and Verizon Wi-Fi for more than 2,000 families. I had to convert operating funds so I could pay for those. And then I purchased hotspots, 4,000 hotspots, so that families could also access Wi-Fi. Not just in homes where parents had lost money, but we also found out that there were homes that didn't even have Wi-Fi cable network close to their home and couldn't even access it. So we had to quickly find a way to get them on board. So because of us having that real conversation with ourselves on how we had to look at ourselves differently, it started to change how we talk, how our actions manifest into ways that we can support our community, and how we become a learning environment. In the middle of COVID-19, because we're not in the post part yet. Thank you.
Feels so good. Good evening, everyone. I hope that you are doing well. It is absolutely great to be here and to be here with you in person. Thank you, President Breaux, Provost Goodman, the Proctor family. It is because of you and all that was done that we are here and in this building this evening. My fellow panelists, I'm sure as we tell our stories, there will be many themes that continue to emerge that is very similar, although we are in different districts. To everyone in the audience and those who are joining us virtually, it was great when the students were asked to stand because I said, awesome, my magnificent recruiters are sitting right behind you in Montgomery County Public Schools. Yes, there they are. And so I said they have positioned themselves appropriately because it is always about a strategic move. And so I said, how did they find themselves sitting right behind the students? But nonetheless, I'm glad that they are there. And thank you all for being here this evening. I was so happy when I walked in and I saw them. It just reminds me of the strength in who we are and what we do as educators, because we are always thinking about what is our role in the problem that we're trying to solve, and what is our role in how we make the future for our students and our community better. So I sit here being very grateful for everyone that's here with us this evening. I say I'm also here as a panelist, and yes, I did receive my proud master's here at Bowie State University. But I also thought it was very important to engage in a discussion with those who are learning to move into a field of education about all the lessons that we've learned from this pandemic, during this pandemic, because education will never be the same. And it's actually something that I'm pretty happy about. I reflected after this pandemic, and I had an opportunity to work as a fellow at the Department of Education. And I remember when I first arrived there for this fellowship, they would always ask a question. I was a principal at the time and said, if you could change anything in education, what would it be? And my answer was always the same. I would love to change century-old structures that have existed in education forever, that everyone tends to believe in, want, and just deny the change that's needed. And here we are. Here we are. Did not think it would happen through the COVID-19 pandemic, but nonetheless, as Dr. Goldston said, we have to make this out of an opportunity. And so that's why we're all here, and I'm happy and proud to share with you the lessons that I've learned, that we've learned, our team have learned as educators in Montgomery County Public Schools during this pandemic. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention, so let's not forget why we are here tonight. The purpose of tonight's event is also that we are here and we would like for everyone to donate to the Proctor Scholarship in the support of the College of Education. And I mention that because that's really important, because it is through those scholarships that will benefit the students who are here. The one thing no one should have to worry about is how to receive an education, how to pay for it, especially when we know how important education is. to everything that we have to do. And so I put that nugget in there because I want us to remember that. It is important, and it is always about paying it forward. That's what we do. This is a service-oriented profession. And I say that proudly because as we onboard thousands and thousands and thousands of staff members into our county, we want them to know this is service-oriented work. So it is not easy. Yes, we will get tired, but we will do everything within our power to make the best of all of the situations that we have for the benefit of our students. So I'll start by saying yes. It was in March of 2020. I was actually serving as a deputy superintendent at that time, and we were summoned to the county government office and heard that there was going to be a press conference. And we had thoughts about what would happen at that press conference, but we didn't know. And so as a leader, one thing we always do is vision. We think ahead, we plan ahead. This situation provided for none of that. So every leader, it did not matter who you were, what you were doing, we were finding all of the information out that we had to react to and respond to quickly in real time. And so on that day, I remember we were sitting with our county executive, and we were sitting there with a number of other folks, health officer, and we watched the state superintendents and the governor's press conference, and then we all said, what are we going to say to our county? What are we going to do? And so that day really shifted because when our students and our staff left their buildings, they didn't know when we were returning, whether it would be a few days, a few weeks, and who ever thought that it would be over a year? We certainly did not. And so graduations, all of these traditions that existed that people wait for forever were just shifting. And there were two things I thought at the time that we would have to do to figure out what our next steps would be, and that would be bring everybody together. This was not a problem that we needed to solve and determine in isolation. It's also very important to know your community and the context of your community in all of this. I know Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery County community very well. And what I knew is that everybody had thoughts, reactions about what we needed to do. So to engage them in the discussion was going to be critically important. And then I also knew that whatever we came out with, and it would have to be that our plans moving forward, our community, our staff, all of our stakeholders, they would have to be a part of it because we need buy-in. We need buy-in, and we also need people to be supportive in implementing whatever it is that we were going to do. So when we moved into COVID-19, just a few things that we learned immediately that we did not anticipate, that I just elevate as points that I don't want to forget, that I think changes the context moving forward. And those were the responsibilities that we had to meet the diverse needs of our students. That also had to be considered in association of what their family needs were. So food insecurity became a major need that we had to address at that time. So we worked with all of our community partners, everyone galvanized all of their supports and came together and said, how are we going to feed our community and our students and their families now that they're not in schools? $12 million later, okay, we recognized that this was going to be an ongoing need, and we had the support of many others, but we wanted our students to be fed and not be fed just because they were not in school. Technology. Everybody needed a device. And to be honest with you, they should have had them a long time ago. They should have had them a long time ago. When we really think about equity, at some point in time, if you were in a family who could afford every piece of technology that came out, the minute it came out and it was announced it was coming out, you always had access to technology when you left school and you went home. Some of our students only had it when they came to school. So that was a great divide that really was not even exposed to the level in which it needed to be, but became very apparent during the pandemic. And so we did every single thing we needed to do to put a device in the hands of our students, and not just our students, our staff, and made sure that our staff were being professionally developed on how to utilize that technology. And for our students and our staff and families, as Dr. Golson said, if they did not have access to internet, we needed to figure out what to do about that. And so we provided MiFi devices and worked with the county government to make sure that was available. And so what we also began to see is the needs that were impacting our students, they also were impacting our staff. in a lot of the same ways, so we could not look at it separately. Technology was the second. The third was physical health. So here we are in a pandemic. We know what people needed to be tested. When we got a vaccination, they needed to be vaccinated. And then through all this testing and vaccination, we had to convince families that this was important. We had to convince our staff that this was important. And in Montgomery County, we had to do that in so many different ways in so many different communities. We had to be able to communicate this in Spanish, Chinese, French, Portuguese, Korean, Vietnamese, and Amharic. And we had to think about how that language and the culture represented in each of these areas could have a credible messenger who could share with them the things that were important. And so being very intentional and knowing your community and knowing your audience became a very key point in what we knew about our work. And social-emotional wellness. Dr. Golson said it very well. The needs were real. Staff members were impacted. I'll never forget the first notice that we had in which a staff member passed away. And I remember the story. I remember the report of exactly where that staff member traveled and everything. And I just said, this is a significant loss. And sadly, I know this won't be the only one. And so how many people in this school where this staff member worked for so many years are going to be impacted by this? How many students? How many parents? And so the social-emotional support really became so relevant in everything that we had to do. And so before the pandemic, I'll tell you, I was working with my team and saying, you know, we're hiring for all these same positions. We need positions like social workers who are actually in our schools and psychologists. Well, now we have them. And it's not so much of a convincing argument that we have to make in terms of why they belong in schools. They should have been there. We've always had families that had needs, but why do we have to put them through all of these different tracks to get the things that they need when we know students show up to school every single day? And so those were just some areas that really became priority needs for us. And then I'm going to say that as we went through this virtual year, we transitioned our students back into school, I went back to, all right, moving forward, how are we going to galvanize the strengths of our community to come in and come up with a plan? So we pulled together all of our stakeholder groups within the county, and we started to meet. And so there were 5 areas that we started out with 4, but we developed into 5 areas that the MCPS staff and our community members, and I mean every community member from advocacy groups to faith-based to government organizations were a part of this group. And we said there are 5 areas that we know are significant right now that we're going to need to focus on and plan for the future of Montgomery County Public Schools. And those 5 areas were, how are we going to mitigate learning disruption? We knew, before the data we looked at last month, we knew that learning would be impacted as a result of COVID-19. Nothing replaces in-person learning. I mean, I gotta tell you, there's something about being in a room together, building that relationship, building trust, just working back and forth that really works for students, and particularly our youngest learners who have been most impacted. So we had to solve that problem. We don't want to solve it individually. And I knew up front there were 2 things we were going to have to do. And one was, what interventions and support can we put in place so that students can revisit the concepts they did not master during the pandemic? And then the other part was, what are we going to do for our teachers to make them prepared to be the teachers that they need to be post-pandemic? And that means investment in them. Because I will tell you, our teachers, I was so proud of during this pandemic. They shifted their practice basically overnight and learned how to do their jobs completely different. So those are the same teachers that I now want to be able to say, how are we going to transform teaching and learning now that our students are back in person, but based on all these lessons we've learned from COVID-19? And so mitigating learning disruption was one area. The second was, how are we going to address the needs of our highly impacted schools? So every year we come, we all know what our highly impacted schools are within our districts. We've always known. So why do we give them the same resources? Or why do we just give them a little extra? Why do we expect for them to have the exact same structures as all the other schools? No, this was our opportunity to differentiate. We talk about that all the time, saying in classrooms, teachers need to differentiate for their students. Well, as a district, we need to differentiate for schools. And it doesn't need to be one size fits all. But I also want the people who are in those schools, our students, our staff, our community members, to tell us what needs to be differentiated in my school so that it's meeting the needs of my students when they come in every single day. And us thinking about what have we learned about those students and their experiences that we want to build upon to make sure they're having a great learning experiences and getting all their needs met. So that was the second area. The third area, well-being for staff and students. We have a program, Be Well 365, and that's our commitment to be well 365 days of the year. And what does that look like for our students, and what does that look like for our staff? So when our staff members were participating in yoga and mindfulness activities online, I joined a few. It was awesome. And so what it said is, no, we don't want people to come to work and just do their jobs and not think about their wellness and how we want them to feel supported as employees. We want to put things in place to support them. Now, I'm one that likes to work out, so I also said, so somewhere in this Be Well 365 plan, let's make sure we have some physical wellness in there as well, because I want to be one right there with the staff, taking care of the mind and body and soul and all of those pieces that really gets hit every single day when you're an educator, because you got to stand up and be ready to serve in whatever way is needed, whatever that student and that family may be bringing on the other side. So that means self-care is really important. Fourth area, virtual learning and work. So we needed to redefine that. What does that look like post-COVID-19? So yes, we had to have a virtual academy, Montgomery Virtual, in place as a result of COVID-19. But quite frankly, how can we use this opportunity to create opportunity and access for our students? We've had the conversation far too long about having access to programs in certain schools that have a capacity that limits access. Well, here's an opportunity for us to again, create a level playing field for that to occur. And so then the fifth area was COVID-19 and other operations. And I'll add on the other operations because right now we're dealing with COVID-19. How many of you know that something else will come in our future? Okay, that disrupts our operations. And I know they tell me I like to control things, but I know I can't control everything. But I tell you what, I certainly want to be much more prepared whenever that next thing comes, whether it is 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, to say every single thing that we've learned about how we operate, how do we translate that into a new and different context. So those are our 5 areas, and when our community members and our students and everyone come forward and they talk about how they are a part of this work, this is how we rebuild our community of education, which makes me extremely proud of that work. And so around all that, I'll encase it with our anti-racist audit. We know that there is never anything that happens in our world that we're protected from in the space of education. So while we were experiencing this pandemic, we also had a number of other wars happening. Race, social justice, in which our students were questioning, what is the value of my life? And so our anti-racist audit really does frame out what do we do as a school system to become that anti-racist school system from policy to practice in every way possible to make sure we are who we say we want to be. And so those are areas of focus. I know I said I could not get everything in tonight, but this is as much as I could get within this time that I have, but I just want to say the work continues, and we learn from one another, and we support one another in this process. And I just thank you for giving me the opportunity to share our story and the journey of leadership that we've been on in Montgomery County Public Schools. So thank you.
So good evening, everyone. To the leadership of this proud university and as a proud parent of a graduate, we thank you for the leadership, Dr. Bro, Dr. Jeter, and the Proctor family. We thank you for what you do for students and the community. I bring you greetings from Baltimore County Public Schools. For those who don't know where that is north of Baltimore. We like to consider ourselves, we're the 3rd largest, Montgomery County is the largest, followed by Prince George's, followed by Baltimore County. We like to say we are urban, suburban, and rural. That is Baltimore County Public Schools. So I bring you greetings from the staff. I would like to just say, I always have to put in a plug for HBCUs. As you can see, we're all graduates of HBCUs, and I'm very proud of that, even though I went on to other places. Picture this, July of 2019, a DC native gets the call and says, you are now having this awesome job of running the 3rd largest system in Maryland, the 25th largest in the nation. July of 2019. September of 2019, I started and looked at our strategic plan and realized this is not meeting the needs of all of our students. From that moment on, September to March, working with our research team, having 10 community conversations, meeting with union members, meeting with staff, going out to schools. I was rocking and rolling, like the students would tell me. Then March hit. I continue to push our board. We have to have a new strategic plan. That's the guide. We were not meeting the needs of our students. We proceeded. July, we approved the new strategic plan. But my colleagues and I realized that sounds good, but we're in this new normal. How are we going to proceed? And so many hours on the phone, conference calls with each other, with other colleagues, and with our state. But I will say everything they said, ditto in Baltimore County. I do want to highlight a particular area that I realized as a young black man in education, that I didn't see many like me. As a young black principal, there were several of us. Now as a black superintendent in the state of Maryland, I am the only one in the state of Maryland. Hoping to get some others soon. We don't know when that will happen. But equity is very important to me. I lived it as an inner city student. I saw it as a teacher. I lived it as a principal, and I'm definitely living it as a superintendent of schools. So when we developed our strategic plan, we had to have a policy to talk about equity. And I realized folks were confusing the term equality and equity. So there's a term now, it's like me too. So if you're going to do this for this group, what about this group? And we had to have some really hard conversations with our Board of Education. Fast forward a year later, the board adopted an equity policy. So everything we do, we want to look through the lens of equity. What do our students need? They're going to look at it through the lens of policy. I'll look through it through the lens of operations. But when March of 2020 happened, we already had achievement gaps. I was disaggregating the data. I was looking at all of our student groups. We don't use subgroups in Baltimore County. We say student groups. And I saw the disproportionate of students not having access and opportunities to rigorous courses. Just saw it. It was right in our face. But now we have a situation where we saw students who didn't have access to technology. We saw family needs. It just continued to grow. So we made the commitment, in everything we do, we're going to look at it through the equity lens. So it started off with a policy from the board. The board is a hybrid board, for those in education leadership, to have an elected and appointed. So right there's some dynamics, but they were committed to equity. they developed the policy. We started to even do the work differently. Do not bring me a data point unless it is disaggregated, because you can get lost in the aggregate. I was one of those students who could have been lost if they did not disaggregate the data growing up. So everything we do, we disaggregate the data. And that caused us, like Dr. Golson, to develop that strategic plan, 8-year strategic plan, and we have our 5 focus areas. But I want to focus only on one, and just the name of it. The very first focus area is learning, accountability, and results. I've asked my staff, how do you know students are learning? How do you know your teaching is making a difference? Are you accountable to your students? Are your parents accountable to you? Are you accountable to your parents? So we had the learning, but we didn't have the accountability. And if we didn't have the accountability, guess what? We didn't have the results. And that caused us to really look at ourselves. As a system that is suburban, urban, and rural, we were not meeting the needs of all students. So just like my colleagues, this past year, we looked at every opportunity to provide for our students. I was even volunteering to give out devices, to give out food, because as a leader, I'm a model. So if I can do it, I guarantee all of my principals and leaders should be able to do it. It became one situation, we were trying to do the SAT in December. We didn't have enough proctors. I found out about it. I said, well, you will have 5 proctors on Saturday at 7 a.m. That's the Williams family. And somehow when I made that announcement, guess what? We had proctors. They just appeared out of nowhere. But we still showed up because it's the service. If I'm expecting our leaders to do it, I should be able to do it. And so we worked through all of these situations regarding equity. We had a policy, we had our division on equity and cultural proficiency, we had training, we had book studies, but I didn't see the action. And during the pandemic, it was hard to see the action because kids were disengaged. We had about 4% of our students disengaged. So for us, that was roughly 3,500 students. Couldn't find out where they were, just disengaged. So when we started to bring back students, I focused on those who were disengaged, those who are already dealing with learning gaps, and then those students who were transitioning from one level to another. So my little 6th graders, bless their hearts, they needed some help. My little 9th graders, they needed some help. And I'm a secondary person. Those little kindergartners, OMG. But if you think about it, they hadn't experienced those levels. They didn't know what middle school felt like, elementary school or high school. So we really had to partner with our communities. We had to partner with our churches, our civic and social organizations. We had to use our CARES funds to do everything that you heard about the technology and the one-to-one devices. But as Dr. Manite said, this was an opportunity to really look at public education differently. And so we were pleased that we're moving in that direction. So much so that when I heard about MSDE, Maryland State Department of Education, doing this study around Black boys, and really wanted to encourage more folks to go into education, especially our Black boys. I was one of the first to sign up for that. So we have this initiative that we're looking at the achievement of our Black boys. And I was very strategic in where that was going to happen in our system. We have 3 zones, West Zone, Central, and East Zone. because when we look at our data, and I see the two HR recruitment specialists back there, actually I know both of them very well. I will say we were not hiring enough of our black males into education. And then as I disaggregated the data, I realized we didn't have that pipeline from teacher to leadership. Then I started to disaggregate again. We didn't have from leadership, school-based leadership, to central office. And so I think it's imperative, and anytime you're looking at data, disaggregating the data, not only by race, by gender, and services, just to see what do we look like, and how can we do better. So I would say ditto to my colleagues and what they shared, same thing that we're doing, but really a focus. And what I was really surprised about as our students were transitioning and struggling in many cases to come back to school, I saw our staff doing the same thing. Heartbroken when I realized there were some staff members who didn't have Wi-Fi, or a single parent and wasn't sure about a paycheck. We kept all of our staff on our payroll during the pandemic. Our bus drivers. So what they decided to do, they were driving their buses to feed families with food. We kept everybody employed. That was the last thing I want folks to worry about their next paycheck. So I will say these jobs are challenging, more challenging in the classroom. We are always working together, although they are very competitive, and I know them both well. But we do work well because we knew during the pandemic, as competitive as we are, we had to come together. We saw that unity across the state of Maryland, that we would meet once a week on a call. What are you doing? What are you thinking about? Or are you about to do something? That's good intel because we know our communities will be asking. So I've learned in education that you can't work in isolation. Whether you're a classroom teacher, paraeducator, administrator, superintendent. It's lonely in these jobs, but what I realized, people wanted to come together and help us because our message was clear. We're looking at our students, our families, our communities, and our staff. And as you pursue education, always remember, students are at the heart of every decision. Right. Every decision. Yep. So we get beat up all the time. And I will always say, we will always say, it's the best interest of students. This is why we're doing this. This is why I'm changing this practice. This is why I'm visiting this school, because I need to see great things happening because of our students. When you keep the focus on students, the politics will happen. You let it play out. But I found after 30 some odd years, 33 years in education, that when I stay focused on students, and folks who know me, they know that's the core. When I go and visit schools, you will see me sitting on the floor, talking to the little students, or talking to our seniors about their aspirations. And I will always say, I'm gonna close on this. I always circle back. I said, there is a college for you. There is a college for you. We just got to find the right one. And they have to give up a little bit more money, and we got to look at residency and all that. But I always encourage that. And I always encourage our CTE programs because there are students who may not want to go to college. And those are great opportunities as well. So what we have done is really focus on our equity lens and to really try to close those achievement gaps that existed before the pandemic, and they have doubled since, because our students need to be with a good teacher every day and learning And so that's why we're focused on learning, accountability, and results. And that's one of our key areas of our strategic plan.
Again, my name is Derek Coley, and I'm going to open up the question and answer session. And, you know, this Proctor series, lecture series, is like the Bowie State Bulldogs with respect to the championship. Servant leaders, champions in education. This is absolutely wonderful. I'm sure some of my educational leadership and students here have questions for you to continue this dialogue and discussion. Anyone in the audience, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. Yes, ma'am. You can stand or sit, whatever makes you comfortable.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My question is, since we know that students lost quite a bit of skills and just overall learning in the last year through the pandemic, have any of you thought of year-round schooling to make up that academic gap?
I can start by addressing that. Thank you for that question, and the answer is absolutely yes. So a couple years ago, Montgomery County broached this subject and created innovative calendar schools. We actually have two of them, elementary. Roscoe Nix and Arcola, thank you. Roscoe Nix and Arcola. And it has been just a fantastic experience for those students and families to be able to have school throughout the year. And we've had a chance to learn from the staff just about the benefits and how those breaks really do support the work that they need to do as well. And so now we're absolutely looking at expanding that, because if we know it works and it works well, and normally they would have gotten earlier.
So I would just add, as a former math teacher, I used to say, I'm gonna teach you math. I knew my content, but I knew I had to teach it to you and make you be successful. And so that real-time data, so I have to know how my students are doing. What I realized, and this is the work of superintendents and their cabinet, our teachers have to teach the standards. So you have all of this curriculum, but what are those essential standards that you want your students to know once they finish your class? And after several years in education, I realized folks develop these wonderful lesson plans and these projects and these activities, but where's the rigor, and is it meeting the standards? And so what we've taken a hard look, all of us, making sure our teachers are teaching the standards, and it's going to build so our students have those foundational skills to be successful. I would also add that accelerated learning is important. You got to accelerate the learning and see where students are, and pushing them and giving them those skills to be successful. Yes, you can scaffold, you can differentiate, but I just realized our students will know whether you believe in them and whether you have high expectations. I tell you, I visit schools, and these kids are not ashamed of telling me what they feel and what they know, even with the staff members standing right there.
That's right.
But I think that's important. It goes back to, for me, it's always the data should be driving us, but don't forget, we're teaching a person, and we got to make sure that person, that those students understand. And it's just teaching the standard, the curriculum with the Common Core and all the changes. We have to really get down to the essentials. And I think in some cases we got a lot within our curriculum, and how do we narrow it down to the essentials for our students?
Question over here, coming to you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. The brain power right there is amazing to have all in one place, so thank you so much. I have a quick question. My name is Sean Coleman. I'm an associate professor in educational studies and leadership. In this trying time, how have you been able to assess teachers' instruction and then subsequently support it? And I know it's a trying, or definitely trying, but also different. right? Part B to that is how are we supporting our principals to be able to do that for teachers with instruction?
I'll start. I can tell you, when we moved to virtual learning, what we found is that our principals became really sound instructional leaders because they didn't have to deal with the bus duty, lunch duty, managerial piece of it. So they were able to be in classrooms a lot more than they ever were before, and they had opportunities to do it with teams. So they were able to partner with a colleague and to go into a Zoom classroom, experience it, and give feedback back to staff. But when you talk about assessing students, we actually realized early on that we were going to have to quickly do assessments online. And by the first quarter, we had given 500,000 assessments online. Now, most people say, oh, I'm sure their parents were filling out the assessments for them. They were not. There's no way that their parents could have been, and if they were, they all got to go back to school. Because the data showed us quickly what gaps existed, and while we thought we were doing an exceptional job in the virtual platform, we realized that the camera off for some meant they were completely disengaged. While they could quickly cut on the volume and speak, they weren't always engaged. And so we had to quickly turn around and say to teachers, you really have to look at how you're engaging students, create activities to make sure that you're assessing what they know, and then we had to find ways for them to turn in work in other non-traditional ways so that we could reassess. It has been a learning process, but the great thing is we just published an assessment just from our summer learning program and noticed that students actually, when they had one-on-one experiences, did a lot greater. And so that taught us a lot about what that virtual platform could allow us to do, and why we're offering now after-school tutoring virtually to students and tracking their academic progress from that. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll just add, I appreciate that question. I'm constantly reminding our principals that you have to give yourself grace this year, because many are trying to go back to what they did pre-COVID. So they want to go into the classrooms, they want to do the number of observations, the expectations, and we're dealing with substitutes, vacancies, behaviors,
COVID.
social, contact tracing. You're dealing with all of this.
Correct.
And I said, you got to give yourself some space. Just the other day, a principal said, Doc, I just feel like I'm not an instructional leader because I'm making changes to classes, I'm doing covering and so forth. I said, well, that is a part of instruction, but it's not what you did before. And so I think that's the piece that we do have to give our teachers and our principals some grace to say, there's the expectation of going in and giving that feedback, but that feedback should be helping you to get better, because right now we have many vacancies, we have many opportunities, and we have to encourage our folks and build them up. So I think the reality, and this is some of the challenge we have to deal with some of our community folks, we are still in the pandemic and everybody's still managing, and so we have to give each other grace. Now, I'm not saying I'm waiving the observations or evaluations, but I'm also saying we have to be realistic that people are still trying to manage, and we want the best for our students and we want the best for our schools. But I just found that it's very important to kind of look at that everybody is not back to normal. And so we have to kind of give folks some space and some grace.
I'll add one more part. So I used to be the director of leadership development programs, and my role was to train principals. And so it's interesting, I've worked with our staff to really think about what are the implications for principal training programs right now? Like the principal that you were prior to COVID-19, this is a whole nother set of skills. I just said a part of leadership is you vision, you always react on the information that you need, and you figure out how to solve a problem. Our principals had to do that too. And so lots of implications there for how we train principals moving forward that we cannot lose. And a big part of that is getting back to instructional leadership. I just talked about teachers a moment ago and how they're going to need to know what the student learning needs are in the classroom and how they're going to need to know not only what it is, the status of it, but address it. But the principals actually have to know that too for their school buildings. And so that's why we're advocating to county government, everyone, contact tracing and all of these things that our principals are doing right now. This cannot remain a part of their work if we're really going to mitigate learning disruption in schools. So I say that because it is about coming back to teaching and learning and leading for learning. That has to be a big part of what we do in our spaces of education.
We have time for one more question. Dr. Golson, Dr. McKnight, Dr. Williams, one more question.
Hi, my name is Ariel Andrews, and I'm a senior. I'm an elementary education major. So my question is, with all of the stress and pressure from working with teachers, parents, and families, what do you do for self-care and mental health?
That's a great question. That's right, and thank you for asking it. So seriously, thank you for asking that question. And so when you become the teacher, I want you to ask yourself the question to yourself. Again, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Because as you are in a role that requires you are giving to others every single day, and it takes a lot out of you, you have to know what that is for yourself. For me, it is working out. Exercise has become a vital part of my being. I realize, like, when I'm out walking, and I get the best ideas. If I'm out doing a morning run or a walk, it's almost like to clear my head. And I'll tell you, the best time to do it is in the morning before anything starts moving. The only thing out are like animals, because cars aren't, people hadn't got up for work yet, whatever it is, it's just quiet. So I just say that, and I'm grateful for a network of women who keep me committed to that, and knowing that that's a part of my life, and so that accountability to make sure I'm doing that is important. So thank you for asking that.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest, I don't like to work out. I do it just because this job can take a stressful toll on you, and it's one way to manage your health. So I do get up every morning to work out, but trust me, it is not what I desire to do. For me, it honestly is setting boundaries around time. And so when I've set that time for me to go home and walk in that door, it has to stop unless it's an emergency. Because what you'll find is that people will call constantly. And if you always answer, I have learned that everyone's 911 is not really truly a 911. I'm like, really? You had me interrupt my dinner for that? And after you do that a few times, you have learned. And so my self-care is honest and truly spending time with my family. I have played more Scrabble during this pandemic than the law allows, and backgammon, and watching Netflix, and cutting off the TV when I come in from work. I don't watch the news for lots of reasons. I have a staff member who gives me every article about us in the morning, and I read those quickly, and then I keep it moving. So you have to kind of set those boundaries, but you learn what that is for yourself. And it started when I was a principal, when I had really young kids. And I used to say to them, to my staff, I have to go home a few nights out the week or else my kids will be in the principal's office. And they understood it. And so I just established those boundaries. I still give 110% when I'm at work. But when it's time to walk through that door and set that boundary and that time for your personal care, you gotta do it. And then a massage once a month. Now I do like doing that. Yeah, I do like that once a month, for sure. Honestly.
So I do like to work out, and I'm an early person. So like Monifa, I'm probably out there working at 5 a.m. Working out. I will say, as a fairly new superintendent, third year, what keeps me balanced is my family, those who love me. I have learned people will smile in your face, and as soon as you turn your back, they want your job.
That's right.
Right? So I've learned everybody smiling in my face doesn't like you, Daryl. Get over it, right? So I got over it. But ones who will tell you the truth, and will love you unconditionally
Yep.
are my 3 children and my wife.
Yep.
So the pleasure I have is boundaries, going home, seeing some of my kids, because they don't live with me. They're grown, and most of them. But spending that quality time. And Monica said something interesting, that we're always in the paper. Always in the paper. And sometimes you got to turn off that noise, because that noise will stop you from doing what you know is right. If you listen and you constantly read, and you got folks to do that, they're going to manage that. But if you just stay focused, I just have to stay focused, keep those, like the students would say, keep the haters away, just keep focused on what you're doing, and just make sure you have folks who love you. And folks at work don't love you. I learned that.
That's right.
They like you. They want that job. They want that office. Dr. Bro, I mean, that's the mentality. So sometimes you just got to keep it real and just have those boundaries and do what brings pleasure to you. If you like to sing, if you like to run, if you like to dance, continue to do that. Don't allow these positions to stop you from what you really love doing, because it will consume you. And that's one thing I've learned. This job is not going to consume me, because if they move me out, somebody will move right in the next day.
The next day.
The next day. Probably the next hour.
Probably. Probably.
It is my pleasure to introduce the award winner for this year's scholarship. Janelle Courtney, a junior major in elementary education, earns and maintains a 3.5 GPA while juggling many different endeavors here at Bowie State. To cite a few, this young woman is currently the administrative chair and secretary for the National Council of Negro Women, Incorporated, a member of the Bowie State Education Association, BSEA, and a member of the Bowie State cheerleading program. Janelle knew early on that being an educator was for her. Already, her experience of classroom life has affirmed the positive imprint and impact of teaching as her chosen profession, even as she assisted her students navigating the myriad challenges and situations that unavoidably arise. In her final year before graduation, she's formalized her initial postgraduate plans to apply her knowledge and experience to ensure success for students in low-poverty schools and to help shape the relevancy of future curriculums. I present to you our James E. Proctor Jr. Award recipient, Janelle Courtney.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I would first like to start by thanking God for making this amazing moment happen for me. I would like to thank my mother, who was always there for me, no matter what. And of course, I would like to thank the College of Education and the selection committee for seeing something in me and allowing me to be the recipient of the prestigious James E. Proctor Jr. Scholarship. For me, hello. For me, being an aspiring educator is deeper than just reading a textbook or not engaging our children in the wonderment of learning. It's about how I can help the future generations excel academically while also showing them the importance of being vulnerable and aware of the world around them. I want to be the change agent for education. Again, I am Janelle Courtney, and thank you for having me tonight. Justin, this is Lynn.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Brent Swinton, and it is my absolute privilege to be serving as the Vice President for Institutional Advancement during this very exciting period in the history of Bowie State University. I just cannot tell you what a privilege it is to be here with our live audience as we celebrate the profound legacy of James E. Proctor Jr., and I'm also welcoming our audience online wherever you may be watching. This forum is just one expression of BSU's long tradition of producing excellent teachers. In fact, preparing teachers is at the very genesis of our founding in 1865. And so now today, our community of alumni, friends, and let's face it, it's really a family. We're all proud of our College of Education. So with that spirit in mind, I am asking that if you believe in paying it forward, I heard you say that, Dr. McKnight, if you believe in securing the future for our Bulldog educators in training, like Janelle, if you believe in the leadership and innovation that is happening right here at the Bowie State University College of Education, if you believe those things, then let's do something about it. I'm inviting everyone under the sound of my voice, here and online, to take out your cell phone. All right? Go to your camera app and aim it as if you're taking a picture at that QR code. And you can see it here on screen. You can see it on your screen online, or you can see it in the program. So I'll give everybody a second to just take out their phone, take a picture of that QR code. Oh, can we get a little technical help to scroll down a little bit on the screen? Is it working? All right, while we scroll that down, when you get a chance, I want you to scan that QR code, and what will happen is your phone will pop up to the James E. Proctor Jr. Scholarship giving page. Now, this is your opportunity on that page to make an impact on our future Bulldog educators, like this year's scholarship recipient, Janelle Courtney. And your gift, no matter the size, is a vote of confidence for this university. And we can use that to attract other donors and other supporters and larger gifts. So please, we ask that you just support this scholarship fund at whatever level is comfortable to you. And it'll make the impact on a life. We also ask that you share your excitement for all the things that you've heard about and learned about Bowie State University. Your advocacy for this university is so important, as well as your gift. So please don't forget to scan. All right, I can't leave that out. But we also need you to be our cheerleaders, like our cheerleaders, okay, for Bowie State University, especially now at the beginning and as we enter the giving season. Giving Tuesday is on November 30th. And on December 9th, Bowie State University will be launching its own Campaign for Excellence, which is our comprehensive fundraising campaign. So please, give a little something at whatever level you desire. And now that it's fixed, take your phone and take a picture of that QR code. It's so easy. And if we all just did a little something, we'd make a big impact on our students. So let me say it one more time. AAA. No, let's do it right. You know, Dr. Bro really likes to hear it loud. AAA. So let's take all of that excitement, all of that pride, and let's do something about it. Thank you. I'm going to sit down and make my gift now.
We're getting ready to close our program out with Delegate Susie Proctor coming to give closing remarks. But before she comes, I want to quickly give a thank you out to our wonderful presenters. And the last voice you will hear will be that of Delegate Susie Proctor. Ms. Washington, our Director of Special Initiatives, did a wonderful job of putting out something that has your name especially on it. And so I want to make sure I get up the right name to the right, oh, Dr. Williams. Thank you. We have a mouse pad and a notebook with your name on it. Oh, thank you, dear. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much for presenting. We appreciate it very, very much. Delegate Proctor.
First of all, I just want to say good evening to everyone here in the auditorium and all the folks at home watching online live screen. We're just so happy to have everyone with us this evening. Dr. Broad, Dr. Jetter, Bowie faculty, staff, Edward, Stephanie, thanks to everyone who brought us this very productive, informative evening. Thank you so very much. Dr. Williams, Dr. McKnight, Dr. Golson, these people bring so much to us every day. It's impossible for us to imagine or measure how they impact the students they teach, how they impact them locally and even globally. Educators like our panelists are the ones who played a major role in our own successes, and we thank you for that. The pandemic caused us to look at a lot of things a little differently. I had a neighbor who said to me, you know, we have 3 kids, and they're driving the 2 of us crazy. How do teachers do this with 30 kids day after day? This was a real awakening for him as to the influence students have on, teachers have on so many students. Jim Proctor understood and believed in the power of education. I have an ask for you tonight. The first ask is that you support and show your appreciation for educators. My second ask is make regular donations to Bowie University as they prepare our next generation of teachers. And my final ask is identify one child that you can mentor with your kindness, your wisdom, and your resources. The James E. Proctor Lecture Series is an annual reminder that everyone has a role in the education of a child. Thank you so much for your support.